It's
If
touchscreen.
Woody had gone right to the police, this would never have happened.
Uh-oh.
So the art is being taken like there's going to be an increased amount of shit talk.
Oh, I have to remind myself I'm here willingly.
Catch one with a little bit of attitude, big guy.
Man, you champion
Well,
sucks.
it's a kangaroo court.
What do you mean? How is the NFL a kangaroo court?
Could you please let me explain why?
No, I don't want to hear this garbage. Give me an answer to the questions I asked you.
What the fuck are we doing?
Come on with it, baby!
That's fine.
Italian. I'll talk to you later.
Let's get to the scene.
All right. My undercarriage is sweating. For the best Italian food in Western New York, Elliott Apollo's, call 716-825-3675. The Lardon Construction Group.
Fubo TV, the official streaming service of Do Champions. FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Do Champions.
For all your summertime needs, beauty pools, as well as kayak pools.
CX Chronicles, your total customer solutions focused manager. W.GG, the official energy drink of Do Champions.
Hey, Sons of Erie, our artwork looks better on your walls. Hamburg Brewing, please visit our tap room on Boston State Road, Hamburg, New York. And finally,
Fat Boy Surf Club for all your surfing needs. All right, and welcome into another edition of Third and Manageable Podcast.
holy cow,
host.
man.
Yeah, 2 weeks in a row with a little bit of technical difficulties.
Feels like a
there,
lifetime.
but we got it figured out, and super happy to have our guest on tonight, who we'll definitely have on here in a moment. Let me take a second to introduce.
Decompress?
Yeah, decompress. Wipe the sweat off my brow for this. With that being said, I do want to introduce our illustrious guest from Cover One.
Good.
There you go. I should have stolen it, but Greg Tompsett, welcome in. Welcome in.
What's going on, guys? How's everybody doing? Calm, cool,
Very
collected,
good,
everything good?
I was about 8 o'clock, and then had a little bit of issues, was missing some parts, and that I forgot to order from Amazon and had to go in and get those. So
that's the excuse you're going to give Greg Tompsett, a graduate, a 1999 graduate of Falconer High School, a Elliott DePaulo scholarship winner. You guys want to see like Greg handing out the hardware? Let's show it. If it works, whatever. It doesn't work.
to your computer.
Oh, it's great. It's my computer. All right, whatever.
Greg, can you still hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so it sounds like we're gonna have to do this for whatever reason. I don't know what's going on, whether it's internet or what, but we're gonna kind of go through this, and there we go. Now we got the internet back for whatever reason. All right, so we have a whole thing planned, and we want to kind of give you a little bit of couple of seconds. We know a lot of people know you're the capologist over at Cover One. We know that a lot of people know that you're a huge Bills fan. But let's talk about one thing. I'll pass to the student real quick because he's got the first one. So,
yo, man, you got the game. You played it well. When did Cover One become the baby? When did Cover One become like your persona out there? Because I think in a mediascape that's so super saturated, people lean on you, and for good measure. So when did it go from Cover Nothing to Cover One, and how was that whole process you even started that? Because it's no secret that you guys are leading the pack in terms of reliable info that you can lean on, and people that you can trust to really be in the know if you care deeply about this Bills fandom, Greg. So I'll throw it to you. Cover One. How the hell did that start, bro?
No, I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. It started, so it's been crazy part is almost 10 years now, 9 and change. It was Eric Turner got things started initially, and got rolling with a handful of different things. He and I both played at a very low level of college. We both liked playing football through high school and into college, and had some fun with doing that. But like the student part of the game, and being able to learn more about it and understand it. Both of us went into normal professions and day jobs, and like everyone else does after playing, football or whatever sport you're into, and realized that like, hey, we still like talking about it and like doing those things. So he got things rolling. I was consistently like interacting with him and loved what he was doing. Same thing with Aaron Quinn. Aaron joined on, and then Aaron had a couple
I feel
people
like this is
that
going to
he
go
was
somewhere.
had some people that you're familiar with who were hosting the show with him and would very randomly be unavailable after difficult losses. And all of a sudden, like, I can't do the show tonight. Like a post-game show right after a difficult loss. So got frustrated, and I, you'll be shocked, but I was a very outspoken, vocal person back and forth with him and Eric. And he's like, hey, you seem to know what you're talking about. Do you want to try to record something one night and see if you want to do this? And I was like,
This is how the Beatles was started.
Sure. Yeah. Let's give it a shot. And literally that was, our first game that he and I did was the Bakari Rambo, Aaron Rodgers
Very
game.
powerful name. Very powerful name.
The Bakari Rambo 2 interception Aaron Rodgers game, and worked our way through, had a great time. And now it's gotten here. From a salary cap standpoint, it's interesting. So from a professional standpoint, I do a lot of financial analysis and things like that. So I'm comfortable with numbers. I'm comfortable with money. I have to read a lot of very technical legalese documents and legislation and things like that. So I'm used to like forcing myself to read through boring paperwork to understand how it works. So I got into like legitimately reading the CBA and things like that, and trying to understand, the difference between likely to be earned and not likely to be earned incentives, and why do people use signing bonuses or prorated option bonuses, and how are they playing around with this money and moving it around. So I started to try to figure out, can I help explain this a little bit more clearly or make it more digestible for the average fan who just sees this stuff going on and doesn't really understand how did we sign this guy and we gave him $20 million, but it only counts as $3 million this year. Like, how did they do that? So I tried to figure out how to do that. And then in one stretch, there was a run of it was the summer where we initially signed the first contracts with, it was like Deion Dawkins and Matt Milano and
That was a big year.
one more. I hope it'll come to me what the third
Please make it not Feliciano.
It wasn't Feliciano. It was extension candidates, but I had put out like my projection of what I thought they were going to sign for. And I hit Dion like to the dollar, like literally to the dollar of exactly what he was going to sign for. And then I hit Milano, like I was off by legitimately like $100,000 or something like that. And it was back to back. And I think, a handful of people that have been kind to me, people like, Sal Capaccio and Nate Geary and a couple others, Jeremy White and things like that, shared my projections, and that became a thing of its own and kind of took on a life of its own. And obviously, like I put in like some legitimate effort to try to look at comparable contracts and things like that, but I miss all the time now. I'm better at it now than I was then, and I miss now. But I just happened to hit 2 in a row really, really like down to the dollar. And it took on a life of its own and became this thing of like people asking me. And it created like this weird, like validation of something.
Right.
Where, it was honestly like pretty just good luck in that I happened to hit it that close. But then that took on a life of its own.
Well, when as Cover One does take a life of its own, man. I gotta ask. We both live other lives outside of Twitter. How do you keep the main thing the main thing? Because Cover One is not a dog and pony show as of to take it lightly. How do you keep the main thing the main thing? Because that's integral to happiness and that's integral to your fandom to keep it going.
Yeah, so it's really funny. Completely randomly, I had taken some groceries and things over to my in-laws earlier today. We were talking about some other stuff and about my day job and how crazy it is, all the things changing. And I said, hey, out of anything that I do, one of my greatest gifts is my ability to compartmentalize and turn it on and turn it off. Like when I walk out of my office, it's off. Like when I'm there with my kids, when I'm doing whatever it is, I'm able to like flip the switch between my different worlds and what I have to do, and try to be able to make it work. I will say there's a lot of the groundwork that Aaron and I have laid on our show has allowed it to be formulaic without it coming off, unoriginal or like we're not putting in work. But there's a lot of things where like I know what I'm going to say. So right now, Aaron and I have every single show up to the kickoff of week 1 already scheduled. I know exactly what I'm talking about each week. When I have time to sit down and knock out the work I need to do, I can do big chunks of it all at once and get it prepped and ready. And then during the season, there's some work in booking our guests for the folks that come on. But once I have the guest book, like what we're going to talk about, we go through the same ideas. So I have to prep for that opponent that week and look through. But I'm also a football junkie.
You touched on it non being original, and I've been a fan and been watching your show for a while. And I don't think I've seen despite the guess, I don't think I've seen the same show twice. And to touch on another point, you said when you exit your office is no longer in the region you grew up. But you are so close. You're the 2-hour drive, and I know you've made that drive many times, especially for me. It's Pat Moran, everything like else. With your close proximity, do you feel like a displaced Bills fan, or do you feel like you're just at a manageable distance?
So the easy part is I've been this way forever. Because you mentioned my graduation from Falconer High School. Once I left at 18 years old, I've never lived back at home. I haven't lived in West. I'm now because I'm old as hell. I've now lived longer outside of Western New York than I did in Western New York.
BW baby,
outside of there, yeah. So I went to Baldwin Wallace when I went to college. I was there, and then I lived another 5-6 years after graduation there in the initial part of my career. Moved to Philadelphia, moved to South Carolina, moved to Atlanta, and now back to Cleveland. But at none of those points did I ever live in Buffalo. So one of the weirdest parts of my fanhood is it's very isolated, and it's very much there's a much stronger presence online than there is in person. Because when I walk around and I wear a ridiculous amount of Bills gear, like most Bills fans do, I'm like the Bills fan in town.
Yeah, but you touched on that. You said you're getting older. You say you wear a ridiculous amount of Bills gear. We're approaching a 4 handle. Are we out of the age where we're wearing other men's names on the back of our jerseys? And if we are, is there a guy on the roster that you'd slap on that big old back of yours?
So just weirdly, not for any principled reason. I like the wearing another man's jersey. Like it is a little weird, but that's never really been in my head.
The story behind that is that at my bocce tournament, I was ripping Tommy Doyle, like just because he's just an awful bocce player. And he just looked at me dead in the eye. He's like, "Bro, you have a jersey with my name on the back of it, and I've seen you in it, and I've signed it." And I was just like, "Get out!"
Hey, I'm gonna need you to leave right now. So I've never had that in-person experience. That would be
pretty emasculating, Greg.
That would be a rough one. That would be a rough one. But I've never been a jersey guy in particular. Like I like wearing Bills stuff, but my preferences have never been the jersey. Like so I have a lot of Bills hoodies, a lot of Bills sweatshirts, a lot of Bills zip-ups, things like that.
And a Duke Champions polo.
I am wearing one right now. I was sent a lovely gift. So I wanted to, respectfully wear this. I probably should have taken it off when I waited for 35 minutes to come on.
Just like we were respectful for your time.
Yeah. I probably should have taken it off, but I'm doing my part. I do own. So I do have I have more of the jerseys I have are hanging up.
Greg. Jeez,
yeah,
behind you.
So. Like over my shoulder, I have like a framed Bruce Smith in a picture and a card, and the same thing for Jim Kelly, Kyle Williams. So most of the jerseys I have are in the shadow boxes hanging up. So I like jerseys, but I don't wear them all that often. I actually used to have, if the one I probably worn the most times, I had a nice throwback Paul Posluszny jersey, like the like
a
silky
lad out of Penn State. I think he wore
yeah, like I wore that a bit. I own a Josh Allen jersey. I think I've worn it like twice, but I own one. I do own a Josh Allen. It was a gift from my parents. So my parents got me one, and I think honestly I haven't bought a jersey in a long time. But that's
Greg,
not for that purpose. It's just I wear other Bill stuff.
Well, you brought up the shadow box thing, and my late father, he was a director of operations for a major restaurant chain here in the Western New York region, and there was a certain high-profile homicide case that happened with an ex-player, and some of that memorabilia did have to come down, and that ended up at my childhood home. And my dad would tell the story, if he was still alive, about his two male boys. As soon as that shadow box came home, that they took at it with a pickaxe, and they ended up wearing this, just playing Hard Knocks in the background. So I can't really make out the signature about what player I'm talking about, but shadow box. That is a good segue. And when I say good, I mean good. Where did that come from? Where did that stick come from? Because it is evergreen. Dude, Matt, you gotta hop in here. It is evergreen.
It is probably one of the best ways to come into a podcast that I've ever heard.
I don't think you've ever talked about this.
No, honestly, like most things, it evolved very naturally. I think I just kind of did it once and like just slightly elongated it a little bit and was like, oh, that's kind of fun. And literally that was it. And then it just became like there was no thought or strategy, or I didn't like kick around other ideas. I wasn't even like trying to create an intro, and it just kind of became the thing that I do now. So it just very naturally happened and then evolved into now. Like obviously it's
just a linear curve. It's
like
always
500 times now.
It's always going up. Stocks are always going up. And you know what else, Matt's always going up?
The salary cap.
The salary cap.
That's right.
Man, we went back and we scaled it, back to what, 94, starting at 39 something, we had the dead year in 2010. How much do you think these owners, these players predicate these big time TV deals, the massive, the extra game, because you get an extra game, you get extra revenue, you get extra ticket shares, you get extra merch sales. How much is that predicated year to year that, cap only goes up?
So obviously there's a great deal of certainty built into it because the TV deals they negotiate are usually, this one's 10 years. It's got an out clause 2 years early. But when you have that initial starting point of, 10, 11, 12 billion dollars as a starting point, it allows everything else to flow very smoothly. Then you go into things like, hey, they didn't really expect Netflix to come along and pay $150 million to do 2 games on Christmas. Right. And they're stumbling into other things. They broke out the other pieces with Amazon Prime. They broke out the other pieces.
Nickelodeon's in it.
Yeah. The simulcast stuff is all over the place. And then you add in the other piece where I don't think anyone could have projected the explosion of gambling the way that it has been. A lot of those are deals and agreements with the league. That's actually been probably the least reported or the least understood buoy of these cap increases, is that a lot of it would have been flatter percentages or more consistent percentages. Sure. But when we saw if you look back at over for sure the last like 15, 20 years, the range is usually 7 to 9%. And a lot of them float in there like 8 and change. And that's pretty consistent. But when we've had the big jumps, some of it is a little skewed because of they did that kind of flattening agreement where they created almost a floor in 2020 where the revenue would have dropped so low that it would have forced teams to make completely unnecessary cuts that were simply because like, well, if we technically do the percentage of the revenue, it's going to drop the salary cap here. And now you guys signed long-term extensions planning for that money to go this way. And now you're just not going to have the money for it. And everybody, rightfully they came in mind like, hey, we don't want to do that. Let's create an artificial floor of what we don't want to let it go below. But, the owners, billionaires don't become billionaires by spending their own money.
Sure.
they said, all right, we'll do that.
Very
but
Bill
you guys
Simmons
have
of
to
you.
pay us back in increments over the next couple of years. So some of the increases we would have seen the last couple of years would have been even higher, but they're paying back what they did to kind of borrow from the future in that 2020 season. But even with that, even with it being artificially deflated, we've seen 14% increases. So this year, I was actually projecting to go even a little bit higher than it was, because I thought we were going to land maybe in the middle of that. Maybe we'd see 11 or 12%. And the fact that it came back into a good range, it still was a little bit higher than the 275 that was projected. We'll find out probably Monday where it lands between 277 and 281. I thought we might even hit 283. So that was what my projection number was. So I was a little surprised, and I was actually a little nugget I didn't know. I thought last year was the last year to pay back the smoothing floor that they did, and it was actually this year. So there was actually one more little bump that they had to pay back from that smoothing exercise in 2020, and now they're clean going forward. So next year I expect it to be a pretty healthy increase, and to go from, say we had, just for easy math, we end at 280 here. I wouldn't be shocked if we see maybe a $35 million increase next year. I wouldn't be shocked if we hit, not only past 300, but maybe jump all the way to like 310 or 315.
Greg, one of the things that I think is kind of like a nice ruse, I know he is due for a new contract and stuff like that. Can you explain the guy that we send to the parking lot these last couple of years to go grab a hot dog, and maybe we'll come out with a bag of cash just to, just to cut, knowing he's coming back, our snap flow long snapper, Reed Ferguson. Can you explain the ethos of kind of what some of those deals look like, where it's like heavyweights? You ever see that movie?
Yeah.
It's like Josh Birnbaum, get on the scale, get off the scale. So can you kind of explain the lure of what we've kind of subjected willingly? I think there has to be a deep amount of trust if you're having these conversations with kind of what we've done with Reed. I think it's an interesting point that no one's really expanded on.
It is. So that's an interesting one. I don't even know if I've ever explained this on a show before.
Someone did their homework.
Good question. So it is interesting, because the reason that you don't have very many players that are in that spot, and I always joke when I look for the, go wait in the parking lot bonus guys, it's going to be guys who didn't have a signing bonus or didn't have any prorated bonus, where cutting them creates a dead cap hit, but then you want to re-sign them and give them the salary right back. So it ends up like costing you extra money that you end up giving back to the player the next day. So the ones that you look for, like last year, the one example would have been Casey Toohill. He was the guy that I projected, because, the shocking part is Casey Toohill signed last year for a $15,000 signing bonus. Like, that is for NFL, numbers.
Well, it's not Ryan Vandermark on the Colts.
But for a guy who made the actual 53-man roster and played, like, that level of player, $15,000 is incredibly low for a signing bonus standpoint. So I was like, well, that's a number that you can easily eat. He's a veteran, so when the veterans will eat that at
the rookie dinner. At least 15.
Well,
right?
when you have the 4 vested years as a vested veteran, you can't be claimed by another team on cut down day. You get to choose where you go. So those are the 2 criteria I look for: is 1, another team can't claim them, and 2, you have a low bonus amount. And almost any player that has leverage in that situation either has guaranteed salary, or cutting them, they still get the money anyways, or a signing bonus that is enough money where it's a couple $100,000. And like, listen, I don't want to eat that and then have to give you the money back anyways, and we mess our cap up further. So the weird window that you fall into is Reed Ferguson has basically agreed with Brandon Beane of like, hey, don't guarantee any of my salary. Don't give me any signing bonus, because then you can use me as a roster manipulation tool when it comes up on cut down day, because we both know you're not going to go out and find another guy on 0 notice who's never snapped with the punter and never snapped to Tyler Bass and their holder, and bring in somebody new literally 6 days before the first game. So he knows he has a very kind of rare leverage in that
I mean,
situation.
Exactly. He's short snap. He can long snap. He's got one of the best deliverables in the short snap. I think it comes out at like a good rate. It's like a spot 4.6 in terms of deliverable time and all that stuff. And that the trust that you outlined there, that, these are intimate conversations.
Oh, yeah. And it's taken time to get to that point where obviously he's had to build that relationship with Brandon Bean. And, like anything, Father Time's undefeated. That won't be forever. Like, long snappers do often go into their late 30s. So I think we've got another couple good years. And like everything, my evaluation of Reed Ferguson at the end of the season is the same as like, hey, this season, did I think about the snap once the entire year? Nope. All right, we're still good. If I don't ever have to think about a snap,
no news is good news.
It's perfect. So he's just in a very rare situation. Not only him, but long snappers in general are in a very rare situation where they have this like a confidence in their roster spot that only like the upper echelon of guys get. Like, yeah, you don't. Just most guys don't have that. Like, a lot of guys go into cut down day genuinely nervous, even ones that we think should be pretty safe. And I know you have a lot of relationships with players around the team. Like, it is a very anxious couple of days because you see surprise guys get cut all the time. The long snapper knows they're not. Like, they know they're like, you're not going to bring in some rando who's never snapped with your guys before and break up that specialist trio of snapper, holder, and kicker. I know that I'm going to be safe. So by all means, I'll help the team, especially one who's been here now, our longest tenured Buffalo Bill. And to be in that spot, it's a weird little, again, kind of manipulation tool that takes a little bit of trust on Reed's part. Because in theory, I guess, they could tell him like, oh, never mind, we're not going to sign you back. It's my non-zero chance. I guess in theory it's possible. But he is confident that won't happen. And the team knows he's not going to go run off and sign somewhere else. So it works out and it lets them manipulate it. And he's the, hey, Reed, we need you to wait in the parking lot guy.
Grills Mafia, baby.
Yeah, I mean, now it's, now that Student has had his fun, it's time for my fun.
Sorry, yeah, my shoulders were were heavy from carrying the load of the show.
But with that being said, Greg, I kind of want to get into some of the salary cap stuff since we only have, so much time within. We took about a half an hour, getting everything ready, my fault. Sorry. But with that being said, I mean, can you really quickly explain like the difference between, restructure and renegotiate, just for anybody out there who doesn't understand what's going on with that?
So that's a good one because I think the terms do get conflated and mixed up all the
Correct.
time. So an official real term in the collective bargaining agreement is a base salary restructure. So a base salary restructure, we'll use simple, easy math, is a player has a $10 million salary. Well, if you do a base salary restructure, you can then take his $10 million salary, give him $9 million of it as a signing bonus, and keep $1 million as a salary. Then when you have the signing bonus, when you hear things like void years come up, that's filling in the gaps of the maximum you can prorate any bonus or spread it out is over 5 years. So if you take the $9 million and spread it out over 5 years, you get the 2.2 million per year. You add it to the 1 million for the base salary for that year. Boom, you took their cap hit from the $10 million salary down to 3.2 million, but the player got the same amount of money. So when you do that, that's simply a tool that before teams used to have to go to the player and ask. The Bills have now made it a habit to ask when the original contract is signed that they'll go.
Is that written in language?
For the Bills, it is. So it's not a formality that it's not that way for every team. There are some teams who don't build it in and have to go to the player and ask. Again, some people think that it's this like, begging thing. All you're doing is going to a player and be like, hey, would you
We're going to give you the money now.
Yeah, would you rather get a game check every week for this amount, or would you rather me hand you a check for $9 million today? Like, no one says no to these. There's no downside to the player, but just so you don't have to do the formality of getting a player to DocuSign or fax back a signed thing when they're on vacation somewhere or whatever it might be, the Bills pre-negotiate it. They build it in as part of the deal to say, hey, during the life of the contract, I agree that Brandon Beane has the right to base salary restructure. Again, they can't change the amount of money. They can't play around with it. That'll come up to the other word in a second. But they can convert my salary, my guaranteed P5 salary. That's the column that it goes in the salary cap. You can convert my base salary into a bonus and give it to me if you want to. The other term is renegotiate. Renegotiate is where you are, like the term says, you're negotiating and changing things. So the examples of that last year would have been Von Miller and Dawson Knox, where we didn't just convert their salary as is. We said, hey, and the harsher term that often is what a renegotiation is often a pay cut. And it's often where the team has a little bit of leverage and the player knows, all right, they probably could cut me. But the team is offering like a middle ground to say, hey, this is probably a little bit better than you would get on the open market, but a little bit less than what we're about to pay you. Why don't we go out there and let your agent announce it as a renegotiation? We will get a little bit of the cap space back we need now, and we'll give you a couple incentives that if you play great and you hit X, Y, and Z, which are a little bit better than you did last year, you can earn some of that money back. So this year, when Von ended up with six sacks, he earned a good chunk, maybe 2/3 of his money back from what he did in a pay cut. Dawson Knox also had a pretty good year, earned a little bit of his back, and ended up netting out halfway between what their original number was and what their pay cut number was, but they renegotiated that number. And that one does take negotiation between the player, the agent, and Brandon Beane and his staff, where it takes an agreement between them and they have to sign off on what is, for all intents and purposes, a new contract.
So since it's very fresh in your mind, who are some, renegotiated candidates this year?
And and on the flip side too, Greg, who is more of the pedigree for a restructure?
So for me, the same way I told you the criteria I look for the cut down day, wait in the parking lot guys, I have some kind of criteria I look for the restructures. So one, restructures, ideally I want younger guys. The biggest thing is, do I see any chance I'm going to cut that player in the next 2 years? So is there any chance that one, obviously cut down day this year would be a immediate red flag, but like even beyond that, even if the player got hurt, had a bad year and got hurt, would I see them getting cut next year, even if they had a bad year and got hurt this year? So for me, that's guys like Ed Oliver. If Ed Oliver has a bad year this year and gets hurt, they're not going to cut him next year. They might not be happy, but they're not going to cut him. Taron Johnson, Spencer Brown.
Maybe let him go to the Vikings and he'll have an all-pro year.
We've never seen that before. So those are the handful that are there for me. That recent deals. Just Deion Dawkins is another one. Like where Deion Dawkins is not going to get cut this year or next year. So ones like that where really all you're doing is moving around like a shell game of when we count the money. But if I look at the next 2 to 3 years of, hey, we're going to pay the player this much, I don't really care how much is year 1, year 2, year 3. So those are the players you want to borrow from, because that's what a restructure is. You're basically borrowing from their future cap hits and pushing some of that money out and pulling some of that cap savings in here now. So the top 3 for me are Deion Dawkins, Ed Oliver, Taron Johnson. I don't love to restructure a contract I just signed 8 months ago, but Spencer Brown looked freaking awesome this past year, so I'm not nervous about that one. So
Shout
he's
out
a fourth
FCS
one.
football.
Good Lord, what a monster.
The guy didn't even get to play his senior year. It was a COVID year.
Just fully capitalizing on what's always been super impressive physical gifts, but whether it was health or getting back in there into that, when he hadn't played football for 18 months coming into that rookie year and then had the back stuff, put together an awesome season. So earned every penny of his contract. Obviously, he's not a guy we're going to release either. So those are easy restructures. And those 4 players, you're talking about $35 million in cap space created by restructuring them. The harder conversations, which take us back to like Black Wednesday last year, all the guys who were on the Black Wednesday list were guys that I had listed as like, hey, yeah, they're probably getting paid more than what they get on the market in cash. It's not a great cap situation, but that'll probably be the reason they do a pay cut instead of releasing them. And instead, Brandon Beane went scorched earth. It was like, nope, I'm releasing all 6 guys and we're moving on. So I'm a little bit more conscious of that now. There are not as easy of math as what there was last year. So an example of easy math is like Mitch Morris, where I thought he was a very valuable player. I was shocked that they released him, but the math of it, where it was like, hey, a $10.5 million salary cap hit and only a $2 million dead cap hit, and you create $8.5 million where 85% of it is coming back in immediate savings. That's easy math, where there's not a lot dangling afterwards. We don't have any of those this year. I guess technically David Edwards is the only one where it would be percentage wise.
Operating at like 2024, we're operating somewhere around what, like 29% dead cap rate?
Yeah,
which is obviously is alleviated this year.
Yes, but be careful with that. So it's gone. Like we're carrying very little of that over, but a lot of people think that that's like, oh, it's like a coupon. They're like, oh, we had $61 million in dead cap, so now we have $61 million in cap space, and it's really not. The bad part of having $61 million in dead cap last year we had to borrow from a bunch of this year's players to get under the cap for last year. So when we had to borrow from all those guys and we had to restructure all those players or do the renegotiations for a bunch of players, that means that this year's cap hit for a bunch of them went up by a little bit because we had to borrow that money.
Could the proverbial pebble be kicked down the road in perpetuity though?
Yes, in general. I mean, there are some limits. So this year, the New Orleans Saints, which is obviously the most famous one, Mickey Loomis has literally invented tricks that the NFL didn't know of, like that he found loopholes into that no one had ever done before. It's like, well, technically, if you read subsection 3 of point 2, like he's pulled out some stuff that no one
Roger
has ever
Goodell
done.
also said that PSLs are a very good investment. And in the perspective of PSLs, it says very verbatim that these are not a suitable investment.
These are not investments.
It's like, hey man, did you get the TPS report?
So the Saints actually have players this year that they have kicked that can or that pebble down the road so many times that they have veterans on the team who are, I don't want to be rude, like from a player standpoint, but are genuinely no longer NFL roster caliber or would be borderline. Like maybe they would still be holding on to a roster spot, but they have restructured and renegotiated and bent around their contracts so many times that they literally can't afford to cut them because cutting them costs more than what their actual cap hit is.
Is this a Bobby Vanilla thing?
It's not far off of it. So I use that as an extreme example because this is now years and years of them playing around like this, that there are limitations. So an example of that is Matt Milano. Matt Milano is a player that I am very open to being the starting linebacker for the Bills this year. I'm pretty happy about it. I think he's still has a starting caliber skill set and physical ability, but I don't want to mess with his contract. He is a guy that if we did restructure it, he could give us some cap space and we could play with it. And that's the kind of guy that the Saints have done. And I'll use the Milano example. They have guys that like next year and the year after, like 2 years from now is Matt Milano, whatever's physically left of Matt Milano at 33, that they had already restructured and can't even cut if they want to.
Well, I mean,
so I don't want to go down that path and limit us in guys where like, hey, I hope that he has a resurgence and is healthy all year. But if he's not, I want the option that next year, if we need to move on, we can if we need to.
Well, and that's kind of the thing. And, you know, when I was going through everything myself to do this show, to do, you know, get everything going and the stuff that we do for, you know, do champions and stuff like that. Like it's kind of, and I'm gonna kind of use one of your phrases, you know, pull all the levers from the banana stand. I mean, they can
that is a good one.
They can technically do almost like 97 million, but it kind of is like robbing Peter to pay Paul a little bit.
I would say it's probably. I mean, where actually, what do you say is a reasonable trimming of the proverbial fat, Greg? We say
So,
97. I would venture around probably around 74, maybe. Reasonably?
So I'll shamelessly plug the show that we did Wednesday night, which was
You're wearing a
our
tuxedo,
salary
lad.
cap
You can do whatever you
extravaganza.
want.
I did wear a tuxedo. It's a big deal. You gotta dress for the occasion. So on that
I'm wearing a
show,
Benny the Butcher hoodie.
I told people at the beginning of the show that we were not going to do any outlandish, ridiculous moves. Every single
okay, Micah
individual
Parsons
transaction.
Guy. Okay, Micah Parsons guy.
That was at the end. That doesn't count. I said after we created the cap space, everybody could have a outlandish wish list item at the end. Mine was trading for
It's
Micah
like
Parsons.
Goosebumps, like write your own ending.
Yeah, it was about that. But during the show, like the actual Buffalo Bills players, every single one of the transactions we went through, I am very comfortable standing behind hey, that was a reasonable decision. That is, and not only is it reasonable, many of them are ones that will happen. They're ones that Brandon Beane is going to do. However, we did more of them than what Brandon Beane's probably going to do. So he's going to be a little more judicious. He will probably do 2/3 of what we did, but in the show we didn't do any crazy releases. Like we kept Von Miller, we kept AJ Epinesa, we kept Daquan Jones. We did a bunch of guys that you could have just released them, and we negotiated some pay cuts for guys to stay, a couple things like that. We didn't do a ton of crazy trades trading away players. We actually extended a couple of big time guys. So going through that, we created 61.5 million in cap space. And I said the 2/3, intentionally. My realistic number is probably around 40. Like I think 35 or 40 is a very reasonable, realistic number that they could get to be able to work with. And if you want to talk about that, hey, there's a priority in bringing back Matt Collins, Ty Johnson, Reggie Gilliam, Quentin Morris, Reed Ferguson, there's 5, 6, 7 guys, and that's without getting into. Do you want to give Amari Cooper money? Do you want to give Rasul Douglas? Just like the core guys, hey, they're going to re-sign those guys. And then you get into, okay, the draft picks and some of the other pieces. To me, that nets out, okay, now you have usable cap space of spending money. I think 2025 is about my number. But the fact that we know any of the other things comes up, at the beginning of that show, I said, hey, here, and I did the 97 million thing that you guys talked about of, hey, if they want to, they can go sign T. Higgins and trade for Myles Garrett and sign Javon Holland, and they could do all of it if they want to. They could go do those things. So if a opportunity presents itself that Brandon Beane didn't initially budget and didn't initially expect, and I'll use Javon Holland as the real example, because right now my guess is they're not planning to go sign a brand new starting safety because they invested at a high pick in Cole Bishop. They like Taylor Rapp. They could probably use a premium draft pick if they wanted. They're probably not budgeting that, we need to go sign a new starting safety. But they go in and their initial projected number for Javon Holland was 18 million, Derwin James money. And then they realize that, he's not going to get that. And then he thinks he's going to get 15, and then it's not there. And we get into a Justin Simmons situation last summer, where all of a sudden it's oh crap, how much is he going to sign for? And all of a sudden it's oh my God, Javon Holland signed for 2 years, 20 million. And it's we didn't plan on doing that, but we want Javon Holland. We'll make that work. He could then go to one of those other guys that they didn't plan on using the restructure and just flip that switch and be yep, here you go. There's always money in the banana stand.
Right. And you always get those, you kind of get those restructuring too. I was pretty happy that we didn't own the land and did the construction with a Roquan Smith restructure. That directly affected the Trey Edmonds money. That market is always resetting. For these restructures, for these renegotiations, do you feel there's certain position groups just by nature of the money they command are targets specifically for restructures? Categorically, you see more, quarterbacks, falling into one category, categorically more left tackles, your protector of the house falling into more categories. Do you see an NFL wide trend as to, hey, this position group typically is best suited for restructures, just by maybe like robust candidates out in free agency or renegotiations? Do you see like these position groups kind of almost being pigeonholed or leaned on for these typical salary and financial instruments to be invoked?
So I think it'll make sense if you go back to what that criteria was that I said I look for restructure candidates. You look for guys that you don't think you're going to release in the next couple of years. Well, what positions translate to that? It's the ones that, one, have the longest life expectancy of a career, like career expectancy, which is going to be quarterbacks and offensive line because they last longer. And like you could be in the elite. There are way more elite 30-year-old offensive linemen than there are elite 30-year-old linebackers, 30-year-old cornerbacks, 30-year-old running backs. We have a little bit in wide receiver and a little bit in some of the other positions, but a lot of the defensive backs, you don't get a ton into their 30s. But you can have guys playing at a very elite level, well into their 30s in the offensive line. And obviously we know quarterbacks even further. So what that does is that it creates multiple different kind of snowball effects. Of one, that means teams are more likely to sign them to longer term contracts where you're not having to play with void years where you already don't have the guy on the team because you're signing guys to 4 and 5 and 6 year deals. And you're not as worried about them falling off because of the longevity of those positions. So now you're more likely to do that. That also leads into the fact of it's the highest paid position and the third or fourth highest paid position, depending on the year, is offensive tackle, but other offensive linemen too. So that means that you have more to play with when you restructure Josh Allen this year, not as much, but like last year and next year. If we wait and do a new Josh Allen extension next year, we can restructure him and save $29 million. And obviously there's no chance we're going to release Josh Allen. So it's just funny money and it's just plain when we pay him. But the same reason as Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown are there this year is there's no chance we're going to release Deion Dawkins or Spencer Brown short of an off-field incident or something like that for play or even injury. We're not going to release those guys. So it just reduces the risk in what's there. So the positions you picked out make a ton of sense. And the other positions, if you just ranked it and you did an analysis of every single position and the average career length at position and sorted it in that order, that would be the order of likelihood of doing a restructure.
Well, do you draw any parallels with the shelf life of Dalvin Cook versus the guy we're talking about a lot right now, James Cook? Same family lineage, same DNA. Has that entered your mind's eye of the shelf life of his brother and the money he's demanding?
I don't know that I've gone to his career length versus projecting that to James, but I have made the comment multiple times that if every NFL player that had a brother or uncle chirping in their ear about how much money they should be making and whether they should hold out or not actually did that, 90% of the NFL would hold out and would look for a new contract because every single player has a brother or uncle in their ear telling them the team doesn't respect you as much as they should. They should be paying you more money. You should hold out and try to get more money. Every single player has a brother or uncle in their ear who thinks they know how much that guy's worth. So
clearly you've watched season 3 of Ballers.
So God bless Dalvin Cook. I would be like that too. If my kid or my brother or my cousin was an NFL player, I would be telling him he was the greatest thing that's ever lived and that he should be getting more money and that I would try to get him every penny he could. So I don't fault them at all. Family above everything, by all means. I fully respect it. Brandon B doesn't care. Brandon B doesn't care what Dalvin Cook thinks. He only slightly cares what James Cook thinks. And they'll deal with that when it comes up. The public negotiating or pinning a comment on an Instagram live is not a thing. Like that's not a negotiation.
We had Matt Glos on the show, NFL agent for a bunch of people, and it's a well-known negotiation tactic to negotiate in the media. To let out little tidbits and stuff like that. And he told us, a lot of these big conversations about everything we're talking about tonight are going to start in a hotel room in Indianapolis at the Combine.
I'll be there.
Flex.
I'm looking forward to it. I've got credentials for the Combine coming up here, and I already have.
Not running? Are you running? We talked about it before the show. What are you running?
40 time is well documented. I will run again this summer when I defeat my daughter again.
I love how he did a chair adjustment just to see if his like lower lumbar is still functioning.
Yeah. There's a reason that she knows I will only run once a year. Because if she got a second run, she would win. But when it's one, I still got it one time. So
You sound like a cut candidate.
hey, yeah, man. What's the Toby Keith song?
Either that or an albuterol inhaler.
Yeah. So going there, seeing there, I am looking forward to that piece of it. Of not that I'm not looking for this is a kind of a bucket list item for me. Like I don't think there's that much to glean as a content creator at the combine, but I do want to watch the 40s. I want to watch them run. I wanted to watch them do those things. That's going to be fun. But I am looking for, like, I have reservations 2 nights at St. Elmo's. I want to watch all the GMs and coaches come in and see who's sitting with who and who's talking. I want to wander around the convention center and see what I can see of different things going on. I am going to go to a lot of the different podium, press conferences and pieces like that, because I think that's going to be interesting to see as much or more than the bench press and the 40 and the vertical jump and the gauntlet drill.
So I want to go back to real quickly. You said you had said something about funny money. One of the quotes we actually used on the side on our sidebar there. Andrew Brandt, actually former vice president of the Packers, actually said before, the salary cap is not a myth, but it can be manipulated. Now, with that being said, we do have some extension candidates coming up, this year. Do you see half of them, all of them, one of them? Who do you expect to see get an extension this year?
So the couple things that I'll talk about with the extensions is, one, I think people are worried too much about the salary cap impact this year. So I'll give the example. Last year, we have Spencer Brown $19 million per year. That man signed a huge contract, well-deserved, and now he would have got $25 million if he had waited. So good job on that one for Brandon Beane. His cap hit last year when he signed the extension, it did go up. It went up from $2.7 million to $2.93 million. It went up $230,000. So Christian Benford, Terrell Bernard, Khalil Shakir, if those guys sign extensions, it's not going to change the money at all. James Cook got a player performance enhancement increase because he was an original designee for the Pro Bowl. So his salary actually jumped from like $2.3 million to like $5.2 million. He got like a $3 million raise this year, which means if he did sign an extension, they actually could probably lower his cap hit a little bit or eat some of it now. For a running back contract, you might even want to eat some of it now just to get it over with and not carry big money into the future. And then Gregory Rousseau is the opposite. He has a $13 million salary because of his 5th-year option. And if you sign an extension, you could actually drop his cap hit by as much as, I think, $9.7 million for his. So if I were to rank them in order, I think, the fact that last year this team had 2 captains and it was Josh Allen and Terrell Bernard, a pretty good telltale sign. Off-ball linebacker is not one of the highest paid positions. So you can get a little more reasonable in the number, the same way we can make Taron Johnson the highest paid nickel corner, but it's not a crazy number. Terrell Bernard, I think, is at the top of the list, maybe tied with the next guy, who I think is Khalil Shakir. I think those two are by far the highest likelihood and honestly a formality. Like, I will be absolutely shocked if both of them don't extend. A close third to me is Christian Benford. We've obviously seen that this team values cornerback play. We made Trey White the highest paid cornerback in the league at one point. I think he was the highest paid cornerback for like 9 days or something like that. But he was, like, when the contract happened, he was the highest paid cornerback. I don't know if Christian Benford's going to get that, but he's going to get a lot of money. It's going to be $20 million plus, because that's what cornerback they played, and he's a really, really good one. Just because it is a premium position, it's a really high number. I think it's slightly less likely than an off-ball linebacker and a slot wide receiver, where those are just a slightly easier negotiation. But I think he's highly likely, and I'd put him this year before the season starts, at 60, 70% likely. The fourth one for me is Gregory Rousseau. He is the exact ideal of what Brandon Beane talks about with the draft, develop, and retain. He was a young, physical gift prospect that you really projected into being an NFL defensive end, and I think he's done everything you've asked for. I don't know that he's a number one pass rusher in any defensive scheme, but I think he would start in every defensive scheme in the NFL. And that compression, rush ability, strong side, maintaining the edge, maintaining contain, and this year getting home more often and getting more sacks and actually converting on those pressures. He's a guy that, whether it's the Bills or someone else, they're going to pay him for what they think he can do going forward. I put him fourth just because I don't know what his representation is going to look for. And if the Bills are thinking 20 million and his team is thinking 25 million, maybe that's like, that's a bit much. We could probably let you play out the 5th year option and then franchise tag you next year and still have you in 2025 and 2026 and just deal with it later. I put him fourth for that reason. I like him a lot. I think he should be, but it's a premium position. It's such a big number. And then I have James Cook a pretty distant 5th, not because I whether I personally think he should get extended or not. The next time Brandon Beane pays a running back will be the first time Brandon Beane pays a running back. We have done the draft Devin Singletary, bring in Zach Moss, let a guy leave, let the next guy come in. Oh, draft James Cook, let him come in as the backup. Let Devin Singletary leave, let him come up. Oh, draft Ray Davis, let him be the backup. Let the next guy leave. So as far as I believe, we've seen enough track record here that in 2026, the Bills' backfield will be Ray Davis, the new guy we draft in 2026 in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round, because that's what we seem to do every time, and a Ty Johnson-ish free agent. If there is a guy that's going to break that trend, James Cook has played better than any of the previously drafted running backs have under Brandon Beane. But in Brandon Beane's tenure, the Bills have spent less money on running back than any franchise in the NFL.
So do you think
I'll believe that changes when I see it?
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. I think, I don't want to say running backs are a dime a dozen or anything like that, because we saw this year, you saw, the higher end, your Derrick Henrys, your Saquon Barkleys, even James Cook, leading the league in touchdowns and stuff like that. So you don't want to say running backs are a dime a dozen, but when you can get that same workload out of Ray Davis, Ty Johnson, Frank Gore Jr., all together, there's no real reason to allow James Cook to be on this team for $15 million of what he wants.
When you look at the previous 2 seasons, the 2 seasons combined, James Cook had 4 touchdowns in 2 seasons. And then this past year, yes, the touchdowns were awesome. And he certainly contributed to that. Like, I'm not saying that he just stumbled into those, but the offensive line had a lot to do with that. The attention on Josh Allen has a lot to do with that. And a 4th round pick in Tampa, Bucky Irving, had more rushing yards, more receiving yards, more yards per attempt, more yards per reception. Like, it's a replaceable thing. And I think people are tagged. Now, the touchdowns were awesome, but they're also kind of fluky. Like, if you had to bet on like what the over under is, knowing that James Cook had 2, 2, and 16, like, it's not a matter of is it going to regress back to the mean, it's how far back. Like, if I told you next year James Cook had a really good season and it was 7 touchdowns, would that be shocking? I guess that's some horrible season.
No,
but all of a sudden, if he's an 1,100 yard back with 7 touchdowns, people would laugh about $15 million per year. So just people should keep that in mind of where those numbers come from.
What do you think a James Cook extension does look like if they were to, sign him?
So for me, obviously, I think at the high end, you're talking Josh Jacobs. So when Josh Jacobs went from the Raiders to the Packers, he signed 4 years, $48 million, $12 million a year. The recent deal that Chuba Hubbard signed in Carolina was 4 years and like $9 million and change per year. I think it's somewhere in there. So if you told me that it was, and you could doctor some of these up with incentives and the inflated, yeah. So I could see an agent announced number where it's James Cook has signed for 3 years, $45 million. And in reality, it's 2 years, $20 million, and we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
And it's if he has another 16 touchdown season, yeah, he's going to earn a bunch of incentives that get him, close to $15 million above the 10. And like he'll hit a bunch of his, if he has 1,200 yards and scores a ton of touchdowns and he hits a bunch of incentives, absolutely, like that he could earn that money. But that's what I think the reality would be, is that I do think he's very, very good. I do think that whether it's I've joked a lot that I'll root for him when he's a Raider in 2026. Like I'll also root for James Cook. Like that'd be cool. I don't want him not to get his money. I just don't want him to get our money. Like right. Against him. Like I want him to get his money. I just don't want it to be our money. That's fine.
Right. Exactly. So we're gonna wrap this up here real quickly. So I'm gonna kind of go to my last thing that I have for you, and then I'll let Student touch on anything else he's got. But my thing is, this team truly does need that high end defensive lineman, pass rusher, or defensive tackle that can get in the in the backfield more than what Ed Oliver does. He does a good job, but I think that they need that Chris Jones type player where they can move him around. You put it on Twitter, you put it on the end of your show. You like to you would like to see like a Micah Parsons here. Do you expect Brandon Beane to go out and get a player like a Trey Hendricks or Hendrickson or a Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, Micah Parsons?
So first, by far the most likely thing.
Way to end a show with just putting his feet to the coals.
Well, it's easy to say, yes, of course, that'd be awesome. It's by far the most likely that at kickoff week 1 of the 2025 season, Trey Hendrickson is a Bengal, Max Crosby is a Raider, Myles Garrett is a Brown, Michael
and
Parsons
Stephon
is a
Diggs
Cowboy.
is on his 4th team.
And Stephon Diggs is, honestly, would it shock you if Stephon Diggs is a Cowboy? Like that would make a ton of sense. Like we bookmark that one. Stephon Diggs is going to be a Cowboy. Just watch. So all that said, I say that because like a team would be stupid to trade Max Crosby. A team would be asinine to trade Micah Parsons. He's 25 years old and awesome. The Browns would be idiotic to trade Myles Garrett. Now they're the Browns. The Browns do idiotic things. The Raiders are the Raiders. Like they do pretty dumb stuff.
Two teams that have moved in the middle of the night.
So just ridiculous, weird things. So I'm not gonna, what's the Sun Tzu comment? Never interrupt your opponent when they're making a mistake. Like if they wanted,
I assure you, I'm the only one in this room who gets what you're talking about.
All right, well, yeah, at least one. The structure of that is, if one of those players is going to become available, I genuinely have confidence that Brandon Beane is in those discussions, because we've seen them swing for Stephon Diggs, we've seen them sign Von Miller, we've seen them make the big move. Sadly, so will Howie Roseman, because God, I hate that man. But he's so good at what he does. So there'll be other teams, and that could make the bidding unreasonable because we have a late first rounder and we don't have crazy cap space and we don't have a ton of young movable pieces. So the example trade that I made on the internet, which got, I think I'm at like 500 replies. It's absolutely insane. It got aggregated by the Cowboy Sports Illustrated writer.
I saw that.
Like, it was my phone has not stopped vibrating since I just made up that stupid thing. But my example was Dalton Kincaid, James Cook, and our first for Micah Parsons. And player for player trades never happen in the NFL. It's stupid. It would be a bunch of draft. It would be the Jalen Ramsey trade. Jalen Ramsey went for 2 firsts and a 4th.
Right.
He was a 25-year-old uber elite premium position, young defensive talent going into needing a record-breaking extension, like the exact same as Micah Parsons. So I think it would be 2 firsts and a 3rd or something like that, or 2 firsts and a 4th. But whatever it might be, if you told me that out of any owner, Jerry Jones was convinced that Micah Parsons should try to take some kind of star discount because he gets to wear the star in his helmet, and he already overextended with the CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott deals. And, I think there's a non-zero chance that he could mess that up and let a like insanely elite guy get loose. Myles Garrett has already said that he wants to be traded. So that one, obviously, I understand the talk is because he's said it. Max Crosby said the initial thing too. He has walked his back and said how impressed he is with Pete Carroll as the coach. And honestly, shout out to the Raiders for putting together a stellar coaching staff. They've done a really, really nice job with the staff they put together for what a crap team they've been. But some of those guys, I think there's a non-zero chance that the Bengals have to choose either T. Higgins or Trey Hendrickson. Like, I don't know. It's possible that they can't keep both. So, again, if one of those guys, who none of them should, all of them should be on those teams, those are not the kind of players you want to move. If one of them comes available, I genuinely do think Brandon Beane will be in the running.
Well, those calls are always being made. And something we always do over here, the saying is how we end most shows. Greg, we pick one player that we'd like to talk to. We'd like to wish him health, happiness, and just to kill it in the offseason. So I'll go first. Pick one player that you can speak in the camera directly. Be like, yo, man, go kill it. Be a better version of yourself in the 2025 season. And I don't think it's going to be any guess who my player is. And Greg, maybe you can help me out here. Alec Anderson is an animal, and what animal would he be? Dog. Absolute dog.
One, he looks identical to the kid in the video that does that clip. Like, if you told me that was Alec Anderson in high school, I would say, yeah, of course, yeah, absolutely. It definitely looks like him. And he is. Like, I love the fact that I actually love it that this year
brings the nasty.
If I had to ask you which of these three players was most likely to get us an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, and I made you pick Mac Hollins, Alec Anderson, or Spencer Brown, tell me you wouldn't take a second to be like, I love it that we have those guys. Like, I love it that we have the guys where we love them, and I know why the other team hates them. Like, I love having those guys where, like, why the other team hates them, but it just makes us love them even more.
They're good people to walk down a long, dark alley with.
God. And shout out to 2026 starting left guard Alec Anderson.
Awesome. I love that, Greg.
Yeah,
I'm speaking to Alec Anderson. Yo, get in that weight room. Get a couple fish tacos in you. Enjoy your engagement, all that stuff. So Alec Anderson, have a great offseason. Maddie, do me a favor. Who are you talking to, Big Cat?
I gotta choose Brandon Beane. I gotta talk to Brandon Beane directly. Not that he's watching the show or anything like that, but I mean, I really, I hope that you're able to create enough cap space to finally find something that gets this team over the hump.
And Greg, I'll throw it to you. Who are you talking to, Big Cat?
I loved your fish tacos and weight room combo, so I hope Dalton Kincaid just tags along with Alec Anderson. Like, eat all the pizza that you can, like, put on. So you need to convert.
Get that Greg Rousseau weight. Yeah, get that Spencer Brown weight in you.
Oh my God, dude, what a good comp! Like, Gregory Rousseau was so lanky,
adult braces,
like so lanky and gangly as a rookie, and now all of a sudden that dude's thick. Like, that dude, that's just Big exactly what we need. That's what we need for Dalton Kincaid. Like, I know you're not going to turn into like Gronk as a blocker, but I need you not to be just a complete net zero, like a genuine net negative where the other team takes advantage of you being on the field when we ask you to block. I need you to at least level that out, and ideally it helps with some of the contested catches and the physicality of being a receiver, which he's still a very good receiver. So that would be mine. I want all the protein shakes as possible for Dalton Kincaid. Absolutely.
Well, we want to wrap the show up on behalf of myself, Student Body Right, on behalf of Matt Diegert, producer Ty. We had the best on. We didn't have the best start, but we certainly had one of the best conversations we've had on the Third and Manageable podcast. Catch him on the Greg Tompsett Show and at the helm of Cover One. Hey, Greg, good to be seen, buddy. Thank you, buddy.
Appreciate you guys.
For the best Italian food in Western New York, Elliot Apollo's, call 716-825-3675. The Lardon Construction Group.
Fubo TV, the official streaming service of Do Champions. FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Do Champions.
For all your summertime needs, beauty pools, as well as kayak pools.
CX Chronicles, your total customer solutions focused manager. W.GG, the official energy drink of Dew Champions.
Hey, Sons of Erie, our artwork looks better on your walls. Hamburg Brewing, please visit our tap room on Boston State Road, Hamburg, New York. And finally,
Fat Boy Surf Club for all your surfing needs.